Before we begin, a warning. What you're about to hear was never meant to be found. It's the kind of story you tell yourself isn't real, the kind that sits in the corner of your memory, whispering when the room is too quiet. A man sent this recording anonymously. No name, no address. Just a single line attached to the email, "Don't fall asleep." What follows is his account a week that should have ended with a birthday cake, but ended with something else entirely. This is 72 hours. I've always associated my birthday with that grey, dying stretch of autumn when the world seems to give up. The air smells like wet leaves and rust. The trees look like skeletons, wearing the last scraps of their summer skin. Most people think of birthdays as something warm, cake, candles, laughter. But for me, it's a cold reminder of the one day I wish I could forget. My fiancée once asked why I never celebrate. She said it with that half smile people use when they think they're asking something harmless. I told her birthdays just don't mean much to me. That was a lie. The truth is harder to explain without sounding insane. When you've lived through something that tears open the walls of what's real, even the sound of a balloon popping can drag you back into it. So maybe this is me finally talking. Maybe I need to say it out loud before the memories rot completely. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to lose sleep, truly lose it, keep listening. The year I turned 13, the world still felt safe. Kelly Clarkson's "Since You've Been Gone" was everywhere, and my friends and I quoted "How I Met Your Mother" like it was scripture. My birthday fell on a Tuesday, so the big celebration was pushed to the weekend. I didn't care. A cake on a school night still sounded like a win. When I got home, Mom had already lit the candles. Dad cracked a joke about me becoming a man of the house, and I rolled my eyes like any kid would. I got 2 PlayStation 2 games, Sly 2 and Ratchet and Clank. Up your arsenal. That was enough to make me feel like life couldn't get better. After dinner, I finished my homework, turned on the console, and lost myself for a few hours. It must have been close to 10 when the knocking started. 3 short knocks, then silence. We didn't get visitors that late, not in our quiet little street. I remember leaning over the railing halfway down the stairs and seeing my dad already at the door. A man in a dark jacket stood outside, clipboard in hand. 2 other men waited behind him, both armed. Their faces were unreadable. I caught pieces of the conversation. Consent forms. "We'll begin immediately." "This can't be legal," Mom said. "Ma'am, this is an emergency situation. Please cooperate. It's safer for everyone." The 2 guards stepped inside without waiting for permission. They began checking the house like they owned it, asking questions, scanning corners, pulling plugs. One mentioned a satellite phone. Another said containment perimeter. I didn't understand a word of it. By the time I got back to my room, my computer screen had gone black. The internet icon flickered and died. My phone had no bars. Even the landline downstairs went dead. Through the window, I saw one of them placing wheel locks on our car. They were cutting us off. I remember the one who came into my room. He was older, maybe mid-50s, with grey stubble and eyes like cracked glass. He didn't say much at first, just looked through my shelves under my bed, my desk. "You got any radios, kid? Walkie-talkies? Science projects?" I shook my head. "Just my PlayStation." He stared at the console like it might bite him. Then he yanked out the power cable and sealed it in a plastic bag. Downstairs, the man with the clipboard gathered us in the living room. For the next 72 hours, he said this area will be under lockdown. My dad started to argue, but the man continued over him. A geological event has released a contaminant. Think of it as a chemical reaction that responds violently to REM sleep, deep sleep specifically. For your safety, we're enforcing a temporary ban on sleep. No one sleeps until Friday 1 p.m. Mom laughed, thinking it was a bad joke. He didn't. They handed us folders, red unmarked. Inside were forms already signed with our names, pages of rules, and a single phone number written in block letters. If someone falls asleep, call immediately. A box of glass vials followed 50 of them, each one labeled only with the number 4H. Stimulant injections, the man explained. Take one every 7 hours, no more. Kids, only half dose. I remember the way the guards looked at each other, like they hadn't slept in days. One of them blinked out of rhythm, his eyes trying to close, but not daring to. When he caught me staring, he managed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Happy birthday, kid," he said quietly, and handed me back my PlayStation's power cable. When they finally left, the house felt hollow. Mom lit a cigarette under the kitchen fan. I'd only ever seen her smoke twice, once when she lost her job, and once when Grandpa died. That's how I knew she was scared. Dad just sat there, staring at the box of vials like it might explode. "This isn't a prank," he muttered. "We do what they said." I didn't argue. I didn't even ask questions. Somewhere deep down, I believed them. He turned to me. "Play your games if you need to stay awake, whatever it takes." That's how my 13th birthday ended, with me back upstairs, the hum of the PlayStation filling the silence while every light in the house stayed on. At first, it felt like freedom. No school tomorrow, no bedtime, unlimited screen time. But as the hours crawled past midnight, something in the air changed. It wasn't tiredness, exactly. More like the world itself was holding its breath. I kept glancing at the clock, half expecting it to stop. Outside, the streetlights flickered. The shadows looked thicker, like they'd grown substance. Somewhere downstairs, I heard my parents whispering. Their voices trembled low and fast words I couldn't make out. Every few minutes, one of them would laugh nervously, as if to pretend everything was fine. But I knew. Even at 13, I knew. Something had gone wrong that night. Something they weren't telling us. And before the 72 hours were over, I'd understand exactly why no one in our neighborhood would ever sleep again. It's strange the way a house changes once you realize you're not free to leave it. That night, every wall felt closer, every corner too dark. Even the light from the kitchen seemed to hum louder than it should. My parents tried to make it feel normal. Mom kept the radio on some old jazz station that crackled in and out between static. Dad made a big show of checking the locks, pretending it was all just precaution. But every time the floor creaked, we all froze. The men outside had promised they'd patrol the street. I didn't see them, but I heard the low buzz of a generator somewhere beyond our yard, like a power box straining under too much load. It gave the night a pulse. I tried to play my game, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Around 2 in the morning, Dad came in holding one of the glass vials. "Your turn," he said. It wasn't a request. He filled a tiny syringe halfway and tapped the air bubbles out like he'd done it before. "Just a little," he muttered almost to himself. "Half dose." It stung when it went in. A strange metallic taste filled my mouth like licking a battery. Within minutes, the exhaustion in my skull flipped inside out. My eyes burned, but my mind felt clear, too clear. I could hear the refrigerator buzzing from 3 rooms away. I could feel every heartbeat in my fingertips. Downstairs, Mom was crying quietly. I don't think she meant for me to hear, but the house carried every sound now. She was saying something about how it couldn't be legal, how no one would do this unless they were hiding something. Dad told her to stop. His voice was lower, firmer than I'd ever heard it. "Do you want him to see you panic?" he whispered. She didn't answer. By morning, the sun looked wrong. The sky had that washed-out chemical hue you only see after a storm, but the air was still. It was like the world had been scrubbed clean and forgotten to dry. We ate breakfast together, if you can call it that. Dad forced down one of those fiber bars from the box the men had left. It smelled like cardboard and vinegar. Mom just pushed hers around the plate. "You're always cranky in the mornings," she said, trying to sound playful. "Pretend it's just another early school day." I nodded, but her eyes told me something else. She hadn't blinked in a long time. Around 9, we heard the first sound from outside. Not footsteps, not voices. A faint metallic click, followed by the thud of something heavy falling. Dad went to the window and peeked through the blinds. "They're setting up equipment," he said, though he didn't sound sure. Then the smell hit sharp chemical, almost sweet. It seeped through the vents like gas. Mom opened a window, but a man outside shouted at her immediately. "Keep it shut. Sealed environment." She slammed it closed, trembling. I think that's when I realized this wasn't a quarantine for our safety. It was containment. That afternoon, Dad started pacing. He hadn't sat down once since the night before. His eyes were red and watery, his pupils like pinpricks. At one point, I caught him staring at the family photo on the mantel for so long that I thought he'd fallen asleep standing up. Then he blinked hard and turned to me. "How you feeling awake?" I said. He nodded. "Good. Stay that way." He didn't say it like advice. He said it like a prayer. By the second night, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. The clocks weren't synchronized anymore. The one on the stove said 8:47. The one in the hall said 9:15. My wristwatch flickered between times, skipping seconds. When I told Dad, he said it was just exhaustion. But later, I caught him tapping his own watch, frowning. Mom wasn't doing well either. She said she kept hearing voices from the vent people, whispering names, ours included. I thought she was joking until I heard it too. A low murmur, not quite words, just a rhythm. When I pressed my ear to the metal, the sound stopped. That night was when we saw the first incident. I was upstairs brushing my teeth when I noticed movement through the hallway window. Across the street, our neighbor, Mr. Peterson, was on his hands and knees on the driveway. His wife stood in the doorway, shouting something I couldn't make out. Peterson's head jerked up suddenly, his jaw hanging slack. He was choking or laughing, it was hard to tell. Then he vomited. It wasn't vomit like anything I'd seen. It shimmered blue and black, thick like oil. I shouted for Dad, but by the time he reached the window, Mr. Peterson had stood up again. He grabbed his wife by the hair and yanked her outside. I remember her scream. It was so sharp, it seemed to split the air. Then Dad's hand clamped over my eyes. "Don't look," he said, voice shaking. Downstairs, Mom was on the phone screaming into the number. The men had left us, begging someone to answer. No one did. We heard engines minutes later, then boots on gravel. A shout, a sound like a gunshot, but duller, like a pop muffled through heavy fabric. Then silence. When Dad finally let go of me, the driveway across the street was empty. Only a long smear of that same blue-black residue shimmered under the porch light. We didn't talk for the rest of the night. At some point, Dad brought the red folder back out. He reread it over and over, tracing a finger along one of the lines near the bottom. If someone falls asleep and can't be woken within 3 minutes, it said, they must be collected immediately. Do not attempt resuscitation, Mom whispered. What happens if we can't call them? Dad didn't answer. I think he already knew. By morning, the street was deserted. The air outside looked thicker, like the light itself was tired. I found Dad in the kitchen, slumped over the table, but still awake. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. He looked up slowly when I entered. They said 72 hours, he muttered. We just have to make it to Friday. But the way he said it made me realize something. He wasn't trying to convince me. He was trying to convince himself. By the third sunrise, I'd lost count of how many times I'd blinked just to prove I still could. Sleep had become a word, not a feeling. The first night without it felt almost thrilling at first, like staying up at a sleepover. The glow of my PlayStation screen was comforting. I could hear my parents downstairs, their voices a constant murmur, mixed with soft music from the old stereo. It made the house feel alive, even when everything outside was silent. But by dawn, the light coming through my curtains felt wrong. It didn't pour in, it hissed in sharp and colorless. Every sound was louder too. The hum of the fridge became a scream. The floorboards under my feet groaned like they were in pain. When I stumbled downstairs, Mom and Dad were sitting at the kitchen table, both with red-rimmed eyes. The smell of burnt toast hung in the air. You're awake? Mom said. Voice cracked. Yeah, good, she whispered and smiled in a way that didn't reach her face. Dad was filling a syringe with one of the 4H vials. His hands were shaking so badly, the liquid sloshed over his fingers. He winced when he injected it into his arm, muttering under his breath. Your turn, he said, passing the needle toward Mom. She didn't take it right away. She stared at it like it was poison. Maybe it was. I remember thinking, we're still doing this. We're really trying to stay awake for 3 days straight. It didn't seem humanly possible. But fear can keep you alive longer than caffeine ever could. I sat with them through breakfast. The cereal tasted metallic, like dust. I noticed Mom's hand trembling as she lifted her spoon. Her knuckles were pale, her fingernails slightly blue. The moment she swallowed, she gagged. Dad reached out, panicking, but she pushed him away and forced the food down. I'm fine, she said, wiping her mouth. I just need some air. She stood up and walked towards the window, only to freeze. Outside, there were marks on the street, long streaks of blackish blue, trailing from one driveway to another. It looked like someone had been dragged. We spent the rest of the morning trying to distract ourselves. I played games until my eyes burned. Mom cleaned the kitchen twice. Dad sat by the door, his back perfectly straight, waiting for something that wasn't coming. At noon, a truck drove past. It wasn't one of the black government vehicles. It was an old mail truck, paint-peeling tires, screeching as it slowed in front of our house. The driver looked wrong. His head twitched as if his neck couldn't hold it upright. His face was pale and slick with sweat. He stopped in the street, eyes rolling up for a second like he might faint. Then he slammed his foot on the gas and drove off, swerving down the block. No mail, no explanation. That was the first time Dad said it out loud. I think it's spreading. The hours bled together after that. I couldn't tell if it was evening or afternoon anymore. At one point, Mom put on a DVD Finding Nemo, and we sat together on the couch pretending to watch. But even animated colors seemed off. The blues looked too dark, the smiles too wide. Halfway through the movie, I realized something: the fish weren't moving their mouths in sync with the voices. I turned to ask Mom if she saw it too, but she was staring at the blank corner of the room, her lips moving silently. Mom, she didn't respond. Then she blinked once, snapped out of it, and forced a laugh. Sorry, honey. I zoned out, but she wasn't just tired. She was slipping. That night around 3 a.m., Dad started talking to himself. Not whispering talking, full sentences. I lay awake upstairs, staring at the ceiling, listening to his voice drift up from the living room. It's a containment breach. No, we're fine. Still awake, all of us. Yes. He paused, then laughed softly, a strange sound that didn't sound like him. I crept down the stairs, moving quietly. He was sitting in the dark, the phone pressed to his ear, but the receiver wasn't connected. The cord hung loose, swinging slightly. Dad. He looked at me, eyes wide and hollow. Go back to bed. We're not supposed to sleep. He didn't respond. Just turned away, the dead phone still pressed to his ear. By the second dawn, the three of us were shadows of ourselves. Mom's voice slurred when she spoke. She couldn't walk in a straight line anymore. Every few minutes, she'd blink, one eye slower than the other, like her body was misfiring. Dad was no better. He kept scratching at his arms, muttering about it being inside the blood. I asked what he meant, but he didn't seem to hear me. When I went to the bathroom, I saw my own reflection and almost screamed. My eyes were bloodshot, but not from sleeplessness. The whites had taken on a faint tint, grayish blue, like the residue outside. I rubbed them until they burned, but the color didn't go away. That evening, a light flashed outside the window. Not lightning, too rhythmic, like someone signaling. Dad looked through the blinds and froze. Don't move, he whispered. I crawled closer and peeked through the slats. Down the street, a man was standing under the flickering streetlight. He wore the same kind of jacket as the clipboard man, but his head tilted at a strange angle. He wasn't holding a flashlight. His hand was glowing, faintly, blue. Then he lifted that same hand and pointed directly at our house. Dad grabbed me, dragging me away from the window. We stumbled backward until our backs hit the kitchen counter. For a long minute, nothing happened. Then came the sound, like nails scraping the front door. Slow, deliberate. Mom started to cry. Dad whispered, "He can't come in." They locked us in. But I could hear the lock turning slow and soft, like someone on the other side had the key. I don't know what time it was when the sound stopped. We sat there clutching each other, too afraid to move. At some point, I must have started to drift. Not asleep, but close my body, trembling on the edge of it. And right before my eyes shut, I heard a voice, soft and gentle, whispering from somewhere near the window. Don't fight it, it said. You've been awake too long. My head snapped up, heart pounding. The window was closed. No one was there. But pressed against the glass, just faintly visible in the fog of my breath, were handprints. Small ones. My size. Except I hadn't touched the window. The next morning wasn't really morning, just a weaker version of night. The sky was pale gray, and the sun looked like a dying bulb behind a film of smoke. Every house on our street had its curtains drawn. Not a car moved, not a single bird sang. I remembered thinking that silence wasn't supposed to feel heavy, but that day it pressed against my chest like a weight. Mom sat at the kitchen table, staring into her coffee. It was stone cold. Dad was pacing in small circles, rubbing his eyes raw with the heel of his hand. His watch alarm had been set to go off every hour, a desperate rhythm to keep us from drifting. "How long has it been?" I asked. He looked at the watch, frowned. 38 hours, give or take. He sounded uncertain, like the numbers might be lying to him. The first real sign that things were unraveling came around noon. We heard an engine, loud, angry sputtering. Dad grabbed the curtain and peered outside. A pickup truck swerved down the street, slammed into a mailbox and didn't stop. It was Larry Peterson's old Ford. Dad cursed under his breath. I followed him to the window just as the truck screeched to a halt in front of Larry's house. The driver's door swung open and Larry himself stumbled out. His face was gray lips, cracked veins, raised beneath the skin like black wires. He fell to his knees and vomited the same blue-black sludge I'd seen the night before. Then he began to crawl, hands clawing at the pavement, dragging himself toward his front porch. His wife stood there screaming for him to stop. He didn't. When she tried to help him, he lunged. One hand dangled in her hair, jerking her backward with a strength that didn't look human. She screamed again, the sound turning to a wet gurgle. I froze. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't listen. Dad's hand came down over my eyes, pressing hard enough to hurt. "Don't," he whispered. I still heard it, the laugh that came after. Larry's laugh, hoarse, broken but familiar. The kind of laugh he used when he told corny jokes at the barbecue. Then a new sound. Engines, voices, the pop of electricity. When Dad finally let go, Larry was gone. So was his wife. Only the faint smell of ozone lingered, and a dark stain that shimmered in the road. We stayed away from the windows after that. Mom was shaking. She hadn't taken her booster in hours, said she couldn't keep it down anymore. Her hands trembled so much, she dropped the syringe twice before giving up. "I can't," she said. "I can't do another one." "You have to," Dad insisted. "You heard what they said." Her voice cracked. "I can't even see straight." "David." That was the first time she used his name that sharply. It cut through the air like a blade. They argued for a long time. I pretended not to listen, but their voices filled every corner of the house. When it went quiet, I found Mom sitting in the bathroom with the door locked. "Mom." No answer. Then the sound of retching, violent, choking. "Mom." I banged on the door until Dad came running. He didn't hesitate, grabbed a hammer from the hallway, and smashed the handle clean off. The door swung open, and she was there, slumped against the toilet. Something was crawling out of her mouth, black-blue, shimmering, like fingers. Dad shouted, pulled her forward, slammed her face under the faucet, and turned on the water. She gasped, coughed, screamed. The thing retreated if it had ever really been there. I don't remember what I did then. I think I screamed too. When it was over, she was trembling, soaked, clutching her chest. Dad held her, whispering over and over, "You're okay. You're okay." But she wasn't. None of us were. By evening, the air outside was alive with sound, shouts, engines, sirens that didn't fade but stuttered in bursts, like someone was turning them off and on. I crept to the upstairs window, despite Dad's warnings. From there, I could see the entire street, and I wished I hadn't looked. A man was standing in the Petersons' yard, head tilted back, mouth open wide. His arms were raised, swaying like seaweed. Around him, others moved the same way, in slow unison bodies, twitching with every breath. There were at least a dozen of them. Some still wore the same windbreakers as the men with the clipboards. Their guns hung loosely at their sides, forgotten. One of them stumbled, fell, and didn't get back up. The others stepped over him without noticing. Every so often, one would twitch violently and cough up more of that thick blue slime splattering the pavement. It steamed where it landed. The smell reached us next burning metal and spoiled meat. Dad pulled me away from the window. "Stay upstairs," he said. "Keep your eyes open, no matter what happens." "What are you going to do?" "Call them," he said, holding up the red folder. "They'll send someone." But when he tried, the phone was dead. Mom started to laugh, a dry, broken laugh that turned into sobs. "They're not coming," she said. "They were never coming." Dad slammed the phone down so hard, it cracked. That was when the power went out. Darkness swallowed everything. The hum of the refrigerator, the buzz of the lights, all gone. The house exhaled a long, low groan, like it had been holding its breath too. I could still hear movement outside, feet on gravel, a dull rhythmic thudding. Dad whispered, "They're testing doors." Then the pounding started. Not on every house, just ours. Once, twice, then again, harder. Mom screamed. Dad grabbed a kitchen knife, the only thing he could find. He didn't move toward the door though. He just stood there, gripping it, trembling. The knocking stopped, replaced by scraping. Something was dragging across the wood, tracing slow, deliberate circles. And then 3 words muffled, but clear, came through the door. "Let us in." The voice was wrong, wet, echoing. Dad didn't answer. "Let us in." It said again, softer this time, like a lullaby. When I looked at Mom, she was staring at the door with tears streaming down her face. "It sounds like my mother," she whispered. The last thing I remember from that night was the door shaking violently, the sound of glass shattering somewhere behind us, and a flash of blue light that filled the room like lightning. Then silence. When I opened my eyes again, it was morning, at least, I think it was. The front door hung on one hinge. The kitchen window was broken. The street outside was empty. Dad was standing in the living room, knife still in hand, staring out through the shattered glass. "What happened?" I asked. He didn't turn around. "They're gone," he said, "for now." His voice was flat, hollow. Behind him, Mom sat on the floor, rocking slowly, whispering something under her breath. I caught only one word, repeated over and over. "Sleep." There are sounds you never forget, the way your name sounds, when someone says it in fear, or the quiet hum of a house after everyone stops pretending it's safe. That morning began with both. Mom was sitting in the living room when I came downstairs. She hadn't moved all night. The curtains were half drawn, and the morning light poured through them like a knife. She stared into it, unmoving her lips, moving without sound. Dad was in the kitchen, still holding the same knife from the night before. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin pale and clammy. The clock on the stove blinked 12-0 again and again, like it had given up keeping time. "How long has it been?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "Don't ask that." He said it like the question itself might break him. Mom flinched when I touched her shoulder. Her skin was hot, feverish. "Honey," she whispered, voice paper thin. "We shouldn't have stayed awake this long. We have to," Dad said sharply. She blinked slowly. "Do we? Maybe that's what it wants. To keep us awake, to burn us out before we sleep. Dad's hand trembled. Don't start that. But she didn't stop. I hear it when I close my eyes. It talks to me. It says, we belong to it now. Her eyes found mine, and for a second, I swear she didn't recognize me. Around noon, the world outside began to hum again. Not voices this time, an electric tone that vibrated in the air like a low chord. I pressed my ear against the window and could feel it through the glass. Generators, Dad muttered. They must be running tests. But there were no trucks, no people, nothing moving. Just that sound, endless and droning, crawling into your head until you couldn't tell if it was in your ears or under your skin. Mom began to pace. Then she started laughing softly at nothing. What's funny? I asked. She looked at me with wide eyes. You don't hear it. The hum. No. The whisper under it. I did not then. But later when the hum stopped, I swear I could still hear a faint echo, like someone breathing into my thoughts. By afternoon, she was trembling constantly. She couldn't sit still, couldn't focus. The fiber bars made her gag. The booster injections made her vomit. Her pupils were blown wide, reflecting too much light. I just need a few minutes, she said, sinking to the floor. Dad knelt beside her, panic creeping into his voice. You can't. You know what happens. Her hands gripped his arm nails, digging in. I can't keep fighting it. He tried to pull away, but she held on. Please, she said. Just let me close my eyes for a second. Then she did. It took me a moment to realize what was happening. Her breathing slowed. Her head tilted forward. A long, shuddering sigh left her lips. Dad shook her gently at first, then harder. Susan. Susan, wake up. No response. He slapped her cheek. Nothing. And then she twitched. It started small. A shiver running through her shoulders, then spread down her arms. Her mouth opened slightly. A low, wet sound came from her throat. I saw something move under her skin, just beneath her neck. A ripple like something sliding beneath the surface. Dad backed away, horrified. No. No, no. Mom's eyes snapped open, but they weren't her eyes anymore. The whites were drowned in dark blue, her pupils dilated to nothing. Mom, I whispered. Her jaw dislocated with a sickening pop. Her lips stretched, and from the darkness of her throat came a hand. Not a full one, just fingers slick and trembling, pressing against her teeth, as if trying to pull itself free. Dad lunged forward, grabbed her by the shoulders, and slammed her backward into the counter. She gagged, coughed, and the thing withdrew with a wet hiss. He turned on the faucet and splashed water on her face until she gasped, choking. Her eyes rolled, and for a moment, she was Mom again. David, she croaked. He held her like she might vanish if he let go. I'm here, I'm here. I just stood there, frozen. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I wanted to move to run, but my body wouldn't listen. That night, none of us spoke. Dad sat in the chair across from her eyes, locked on her every movement. He wouldn't let her out of sight, not even to go to the bathroom. I sat in the hallway, knees pulled to my chest, listening. Every so often, I heard her muttering nonsense phrases, a child's rhyme she used to hum when I was little. But the words were wrong, now twisted. Stay awake, the dark will eat. Stay awake, the dream will sleep. It looped over and over until my head throbbed. At some point, I must have drifted not asleep, just blank. When I blinked, hours were gone. Dad was gone too. I panicked, called out for him. Nothing. The house felt smaller, heavier. Then I heard its soft footsteps coming down the hallway. Dad. No answer. Mom appeared from the kitchen instead. Her movements were slow, deliberate. The shadows seemed to cling to her as she stepped closer. Her face looked normal at first, until she smiled. The corners of her mouth tore slightly when she did. "Sweetheart," she said. Her voice was calm. Now too calm. "You look so tired." "I'm not," I lied. "You are. I can see it in your eyes." She reached out her fingers, trembling, streaked with faint blue stains. "You don't have to fight anymore." I backed away. "Where's Dad?" Her smile twitched. "Sleeping." The word hung in the air like a curse. I turned and ran for the stairs. She followed, calling my name in a tone that wasn't hers. Soft, almost loving. "Come back. It's easier if you don't struggle." I slammed my bedroom door and locked it. For a long time, she stood outside, whispering to herself. Then silence. When I finally dared to open the door, she was gone. Dad came back near dawn, covered in dirt, holding one of the booster vials. He didn't ask what happened. Maybe he already knew. "She's sick," he said. "We both are." He didn't meet my eyes when he said it. I looked toward the window. Outside, the horizon glowed faint blue, the same color as the stuff that had crawled from Mom's mouth. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, once, then died. For a moment, I wondered if that was the sound of help coming, or the sound of it ending. There comes a point when exhaustion stops feeling like tiredness and starts feeling like drowning. You're still moving, still breathing, but every second feels heavier than the last. That's what the sixth night was, a slow, quiet drowning. Dad hadn't slept in 2 days. Neither had I. Mom. I don't know what she was anymore. She stayed in the basement now, behind a locked door. Sometimes I heard her humming. Other times, something else answered. The house smelled like iron and sweat. The lights flickered every few minutes, and when they did, the shadows seemed to crawl closer, like they'd been waiting for the chance to move. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a single booster vial, the last one. The liquid inside shimmered faintly, glowing like a heartbeat. Dad was pacing again. He'd started talking to himself days ago, but by now he wasn't even using real words, just fragments, whispers, half-thoughts. His shirt was soaked through, hands trembling. He'd forgotten to eat. "We'll make it," he said, to no one in particular. "Just one more night." He said it like a prayer or a promise he knew he couldn't keep. Around midnight, the power went out for good. The house sank into silence, so deep it roared in my ears. Dad found an old flashlight, the beam trembling in his hands as he swept it across the walls. The beam caught on something at the bottom of the stairs, blue streaks faint but fresh, smeared like handprints. He froze. "She's been up here." I didn't say anything. The humming from the basement had stopped hours ago. He gripped the flashlight tighter. "Stay here," he said. "If anything happens, you run. You don't stop. Understand?" I nodded, but I knew I wouldn't leave him. He moved toward the basement door, each step a creak that echoed too loud. He pressed his ear to the wood, listening. Nothing. Then slowly he turned the knob. The smell hit first sweet rot, like spoiled fruit mixed with blood. He opened the door and aimed the flashlight down. The beam shook, painting the narrow stairwell in slices of light. The humming started again. "Mom," he whispered. Her voice floated up from the dark. "David." "Come down here." I don't know why, but the sound of it made my stomach turn. It wasn't wrong exactly. It was her tone, her rhythm, but it carried an echo, like someone was speaking along with her, half a beat behind. Dad started down the stairs. I wanted to stop him. I didn't. He disappeared into the dark. The flashlight beam bounced on the walls, then stilled. For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard him gasp, "Jesus Christ." I couldn't help it, I followed. The air grew thicker the deeper I went heavy, with that same metallic stench. When I reached the bottom, the beam of light found the concrete floor. She was there sitting against the wall. Her skin was pale and slick with sweat, her eyes too wide. "Mom," I whispered. She smiled slowly, lips cracking. "You shouldn't be awake, sweetheart." Dad took a step forward. "Susan, we're going to get you help. They'll come. We just need to hold out a few more hours." Her head tilted. "They're not coming, David. They never were." Something shifted behind her movement in the dark. A faint rustle like fabric dragging on concrete. Then I saw it. The wall behind her pulsed. The blue-black residue had spread into veins, twisting up the brick, throbbing faintly with light. Something inside the wall moved. Dad raised the flashlight higher. His voice broke. "What did you do?" "I stopped fighting," she said softly. "It's so much easier if you stop." Her hand slid down her arm, revealing long scratches where the skin had torn. Underneath, something shimmered dark and wet like oil. Dad stumbled backward. "Stay away from her," he hissed at me. But she was already standing. The light caught her face. Her eyes were completely black now, reflecting the faint blue glow from the wall. When she opened her mouth, that same glow spilled from her throat, pulsing with each word. "It doesn't hurt anymore." Dad raised the knife. His hands were shaking so badly, I thought he'd drop it. "Please," he whispered. "Don't make me." She moved faster than I thought possible. The knife clattered to the floor. The two of them fell together, her voice turning from words to a guttural growl that didn't sound human. I couldn't watch. I turned and ran back up the stairs, slamming the door behind me. The screaming didn't stop right away. It rose and fell, like the wind, then turned into a choking sound, then silence. I sat on the kitchen floor for what felt like hours, staring at the door. Every creak of the house made my heart jump. When it finally opened, Dad stepped out. His shirt was torn, his face streaked with something dark. His eyes looked hollow. "She's gone," he said. But his voice was wrong. I didn't answer. He dropped to his knees, shaking. I had to stop it. There was a long pause. Then he looked up at me, tears cutting lines down his cheeks. "You have to stay awake." "Okay, just until morning. Promise me, I promise." He nodded, then slumped against the wall. His breathing slowed, deepened. "Dad." No response. I shook him. His head lolled to the side, eyes half open. "Dad, wake up." Nothing. And then something shifted in his throat. His jaw moved on its own, like he was trying to speak. "Dadun," a faint sound escaped his mouth. Not words, just a wet, bubbling whisper. I stumbled backward, tripping over the fallen flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor and stopped on his face. His eyes blinked once, then twice. But it wasn't him anymore. I ran. I don't know how long or where. I remember the front door slamming open, the cold air hitting my face, the night swallowing me whole. The neighborhood was chaos. Fires burned in distant houses. Figures wandered the streets, twitching, stumbling, murmuring to themselves. Some were laughing. Others just stood perfectly still, heads tilted back toward the sky. The air shimmered faintly, like heat, rising from asphalt. I could see the blue glow spreading between the cracks in the road, pulsing like veins. Someone shouted my name. I turned, but no one was there. The voice came again, closer behind me this time. "Come back inside," it said. It was Dad's voice. I didn't look. I just ran. The last thing I remember from that night was collapsing near the old park at the edge of town. The pond there was still reflecting the stars that weren't stars at all. They flickered blue, shifting like something alive. I looked down into the water, and for a moment, I thought I saw my reflection blink when I didn't. Then everything went black. They said they found me 9 miles from my house, face down on the shoulder of a highway, covered in mud and dried blood that wasn't mine. I don't remember getting that far. I don't remember anything after the park, just darkness, and a voice whispering in my head, telling me I could rest now. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The first thing I noticed was the light too bright, too clean. The second was the sound, a steady beeping that kept time with my heart, proving I was still alive. A nurse was there. She smiled when I stirred. "You're lucky," she said softly. "They said most people didn't make it." I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. "My parents," she hesitated. "They're alive." For a moment, I felt relief, but then she added, "They're being cared for." Her tone told me everything. Days passed before I saw them. The doctors said I'd been unconscious for nearly 12 hours, straight after the containment lifted. They called it post-exposure fatigue. I called it the first real sleep I'd had in nearly a week. When they finally let me walk, the world outside my room didn't look right. The halls were empty, most of the lights flickering, and the few staff I saw moved quietly. Every door I passed was shut, some sealed with yellow tape. They told me not to look inside any of them. When I reached the quarantine ward, a man in a hazmat suit stopped me. He checked my wristband twice before nodding to someone unseen. A door clicked open, and the smell hit me antiseptic, barely covering something sour underneath. Mom sat in a chair by the window. Her eyes were closed, her head tilted forward as if she were asleep, but every few seconds she'd twitch her body, jerking like a puppet's. "Mom." Her eyes opened. She smiled. "Hey, birthday boy?" Her voice was the same, but the warmth wasn't there. It sounded hollow, like she was repeating something she'd been told to say. "How are you feeling?" I asked. She blinked once, then again. "Sleepy," she whispered, and her head began to droop. A nurse hurried in and injected something into her IV. Mom's eyes snapped open again, wide and frightened, but she didn't say another word. "Where's my dad?" I asked. The nurse didn't answer. She just nodded toward the next room. He was awake when I found him. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. His skin looked dry grayish, like the color had been drained from him. When I said his name, he looked up slowly. "Can't taste anything," he murmured. "Can't smell anything either." I didn't know what to say. He rubbed his eyes. "They said we were lucky. Said it was just exposure to a chemical. But it wasn't, was it?" I didn't answer. He leaned forward, voice shaking. It got inside her. Inside all of them. I saw it. I wanted to believe he was wrong, that it was just trauma. But part of me remembered that moment in the basement, the thing moving behind her skin, the blue light in her throat, the humming that still rang in my ears when the room was too quiet. They released me a week later with a small bottle of pills and a list of symptoms to report if they returned. No one mentioned the others. No one talked about the street, the bodies, the burning houses. When I asked what really happened, the man at the discharge desk said localized panic event. Gas leak. It's all been handled. A gas leak doesn't make people's eyes turn black. It doesn't make them laugh when they die. But I didn't argue. I went back home, or what was left of it. The neighborhood was unrecognizable. Most of the houses had been bulldozed, the ground scraped clean. A chain-link fence surrounded the entire block, with a government warning sign bolted to the gate contamination zone. Do not enter. Behind the fence, I could still see the outline of where our house had stood. The soil there shimmered faintly under the sunlight, like oil floating on water. I thought I heard humming again. That night I couldn't sleep. The silence was too thick. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw blue light pulsing behind my eyelids, rhythmic alive. Around 3 a.m., I heard something. A faint knock, 3 short taps. It came from the front door. My heart froze. For a long moment, I just stood there staring at the hallway. Then it came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I forced myself to move. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely turn the handle. When I opened the door, no one was there. Just the cool night air and the distant hum of the power lines. I stepped outside. The street was empty. But there in the middle of the road was a small cardboard box. No markings, no labels, just sitting there, waiting. Inside were 3 things, a single red folder identical to the one from before. 1 glass vial filled with faintly glowing blue liquid. And a note. The handwriting was blocky precise, in case it starts again. It's been years since then. I don't talk about it. Not with my fiancée, not with anyone. But every October, when the air turns cold and the leaves start dying, I feel it again. The pull behind my eyes, the ache in my chest when I get too close to sleep. I've tried throwing the vial away, but somehow it always finds its way back. I don't even keep it in the house anymore. I buried it behind the old oak near the fence. Still sometimes, I swear I can see a faint glow through the dirt when the moon's right. Mom's in long-term care now. They call it narcolepsy, but it's more than that. She'll be sitting upright, eyes open, and suddenly she'll start humming. The same lullaby she sang the night before it all went wrong. Dad barely speaks. He stares at the television, but I don't think he's really watching. Sometimes in the reflection of the screen, I think I see movement behind him. Something dark and fluid, breathing in time with his pulse. I don't tell anyone that part. Last week I woke up on the floor beside my bed. I don't remember falling asleep. My arm ached. When I looked down, there was a faint bruise round, like the mark of a needle. I went out back, dug up the box. The vial was gone. Only the red folder remained. Inside, 1 new page had been added. No letterhead, no signature. Just a single sentence typed in black ink. Exposure complete. Containment failed. I don't know what that means. But tonight the air feels heavy again. The world sounds too quiet. And somewhere just beneath the silence, I can hear it, the hum. Low, patient, calling me home. That was 72 hours. The man who recorded it disappeared a few months after sending this story. His house was found empty. No signs of a struggle. No trace of the red folder. But every year, around the same week in October, neighbors report a faint humming in the air, a sound like distant machinery. Or maybe breathing. They say if you listen too closely, you'll start to hear words in it. Stay awake. Thank you for listening and for surviving the night. This has been NightLore. Until next time, keep your lights low. And whatever you do, don't fall asleep.